Something felt wrong the moment my daughter asked me to go for a drive. Her voice was calm, but her eyes felt distant. She said it was just fresh air, nothing serious. But the deeper we drove into the mountains, the quieter she became. And when she finally told me why we were there, I realized I might not make it back alive. Something felt wrong the moment my daughter told me to get in the car. It wasn't what she said. It was how she said it. Her voice was calm, almost too calm. "Mom, let's go for a drive," she said. "You've been inside too much." I remember looking at her for a second longer than usual. Because something in her eyes felt distant. Not cold. Not angry. Just empty. Still, I smiled. Because she was my daughter. And no matter how old she got, I wanted to believe I knew her. "All right," I said softly, reaching for my coat. "Where are we going?" "Just somewhere quiet," she replied. "Fresh air might be good for you." Fresh air. That's what she called it. And at the time, I believed her. The drive started like any other. The roads were familiar. The traffic was light. And for the first few minutes, we talked about small things. The weather. Groceries. A neighbor who had recently moved away. Normal things. Comfortable things. But then, the conversation faded. And the silence that followed didn't feel natural. I glanced at her. Her hands were steady on the wheel. Her eyes fixed on the road ahead. She didn't look at me once. "You've been busy lately," I said gently. "Work," she replied. Just one word. Short. Closed. I nodded slowly. "You haven't been visiting as much." "I know." Another short answer. I shifted slightly in my seat. Something felt off. But I couldn't explain why. About 20 minutes into the drive, I realized something. We weren't heading toward town. We were going the opposite direction. Toward the mountains. "Where exactly are we going?" I asked. She didn't answer immediately. "Just a quiet place I know." Her tone didn't change. Still calm. Still steady. But now, something inside me tightened. Because I didn't recognize the road anymore. The houses became fewer. The streets grew narrower. Trees began to line both sides of the road. Tall. Dense. Almost closing in. I looked out the window. The sky seemed dimmer here. As if the sunlight couldn't fully reach through the trees. "It's been a while since we've come this way," I said. She nodded slightly. Yeah. That was it. No explanation. No conversation. Just silence again. Another 15 minutes passed. The road turned into a gravel path. The sound of the tires changed. Louder. Rougher. And that's when I felt it. That quiet feeling in my chest. The one you can't ignore. The one that tells you something isn't right. "Are we close?" I asked. Almost. She still didn't look at me. We drove deeper. Farther away from everything. No houses. No cars. No signs of people. Just trees. Mountains. And silence. Then she finally stopped the car. The engine turned off. And for a moment, everything was completely still. I looked around. We were in the middle of nowhere. A narrow clearing. Surrounded by tall trees. The mountains rising quietly in the distance. It was beautiful. But it didn't feel peaceful. "Why did we stop here?" I asked softly. She took a breath. Then, she finally looked at me. And in that moment, I didn't recognize her. Not fully. Because the warmth I had always known wasn't there. "Mom," she said quietly. We need to talk. My heart skipped. Because I knew. This wasn't just a drive anymore. What about? I asked. She hesitated. Then she said something that didn't make sense at first. About your insurance. I frowned slightly. My insurance? She nodded. Yeah. There was a pause. Then she added. You have a good policy. I felt a strange chill. I don't understand. She looked away for a moment. Then back at me. You always said it was for emergencies. Yes, I replied slowly. Or for family. There was something in her tone now. Something I couldn't ignore. Why are we talking about this here? I asked. She didn't answer right away. And that silence was louder than anything she could have said. Then she spoke. And her words changed everything. I've been struggling, Mom. Her voice was still calm. But now, there was something underneath it. Something heavier. Financially, she added. I didn't want to tell you. I listened quietly. Trying to understand. But this isn't the way to talk about it, I said gently. We could have stayed home. She shook her head. No. And that single word carried something final. I felt my hands grow cold. Then why are we here? I asked. She looked at me. Really looked at me this time. And what I saw in her eyes wasn't anger. Wasn't sadness. It was something worse. Desperation. I didn't know what else to do, she said. And in that moment, everything inside me went still. Because deep down, I started to understand. Not completely. Not clearly. But enough to feel afraid. The mountains were quiet. The trees didn't move. Even the air felt still. As if the world itself was holding its breath. And sitting there. In that car. With my own daughter beside me. I realized something I never thought I would. I wasn't safe. The silence inside the car felt heavier than anything I had ever experienced. I could hear my own breathing. Slow. Careful. Like if I moved too quickly, something would break. I looked at her again. My daughter. The same girl I had raised. The same girl who used to hold my hand when she was scared of the dark. And yet, sitting beside me now. She felt like a stranger. What do you mean, you didn't know what else to do? I asked gently. My voice didn't shake. At least. I tried not to let it. She stared straight ahead. I've been in debt for months, she said. I kept thinking I could fix it. I listened quietly. I borrowed money, then more money. Her hands tightened on the steering wheel. And now I can't keep up. I took a slow breath. Why didn't you tell me? I asked softly. I could have helped. She shook her head. You already helped enough. That confused me. I didn't even know you were struggling. That's the point, she replied. Her voice was flat again. Distant. I looked out the window for a moment. The trees stood tall and still. Unmoving. Just like everything inside me. Then I turned back to her. There's always another way, I said carefully. We can figure this out together. She didn't respond. And that silence made my chest tighten even more. Then she said something I will never forget. They said this was the only way. I froze. They? I repeated. She didn't answer immediately. And that hesitation told me everything I needed to know. You're not alone in this, I said quietly. It wasn't a question. It was a realization. Her lips pressed together. I made some bad choices, she said. People I shouldn't have trusted. My heart sank. Because now, this wasn't just about her anymore. This involved others. People I didn't know. People who might have pushed her here. What did they tell you? I asked gently. She finally looked at me again. And this time, I saw something different. Fear. They said, if I don't fix it soon. She didn't finish the sentence. But she didn't need to. I understood. I leaned back slowly. Trying to stay calm. Trying to think clearly. Your insurance, she said again. And that's when the truth hit me fully. Not in pieces. Not slowly. All at once. This wasn't just a conversation. This wasn't just a problem. This was a plan. My heart began to race. But I kept my face still. Because panic wouldn't help. Not here. Not now. You brought me here, for that? I asked softly. She didn't answer. But she didn't deny it either. And that silence was louder than anything else. I felt something shift inside me. Not fear. Not exactly. Something stronger. Something steady. Because in that moment, I knew I had to stay calm. For both of us. You don't have to do this, I said gently. My voice softer now. More careful. We can go back. She shook her head slowly. It's too late. No, I said firmly. It's not. She closed her eyes for a second. As if she was trying to block everything out. I didn't want it to be like this, she whispered. And for the first time, her voice broke. Just a little. I leaned slightly toward her. You're scared, I said softly. She didn't respond. But I could see it now. Clearer than before. The calm wasn't real. It was something she was forcing. Something she was holding on to. Because underneath it, she was falling apart. They're waiting, she said suddenly. My heart tightened again. Waiting for what? She swallowed. For me to finish this. The words felt cold. Sharp. Unreal. I looked around again. The mountains. The trees. The empty road. No one else was there. But somehow, it didn't feel empty anymore. It felt watched. Listen to me, I said carefully. You don't have to do anything for them. You don't understand, she replied quickly. They won't stop. They will, I said firmly. But not like this. She shook her head again. They said if I don't fix it, they'll come after me. And you think this will fix it? I asked gently. She didn't answer. Because deep down, she already knew. I took a slow breath. Then I said something I hoped would reach her. If you go through with this. I paused. You won't just lose me. She looked at me. Confused. You'll lose yourself too. That hit something. I saw it in her eyes. A flicker. Small, but real. The silence returned. But this time, it felt different. Not heavy. Not frozen. But shifting. She looked down at her hands. Still gripping the wheel. Then slowly. Her grip loosened. I didn't think it would feel like this, she said quietly. How did you think it would feel? I asked. I don't know, she whispered. Easier. I shook my head gently. It's never easy, when it's wrong. Another long silence. But this time, something was changing. I could feel it. She looked out the window. Then back at me. Her eyes no longer empty. Now, they were full of something else. Conflict. I don't know what to do, she said. And for the first time since this started. She sounded like my daughter again. I reached out slowly. Placed my hand over hers. You start by not doing this, I said softly. And then, we figure out the rest. She didn't pull away. She didn't speak. But she didn't move either. And in that moment, sitting in that quiet car, surrounded by mountains and silence, I realized something. This wasn't over. Not yet. But something inside her had started to break. And that meant there was still hope. For a long moment, neither of us spoke. The air inside the car felt thick, like it was holding everything we hadn't said yet. My hand was still resting on hers. Warm. Shaking, just slightly. But she didn't pull away. And that gave me hope. I don't know how to fix this, she said quietly. Her voice no longer sounded calm. Now, it sounded lost. I turned slightly toward her. We don't have to fix everything right now, I said gently. We just have to make the right next choice. She stared at the steering wheel. What if it's already too late? It's not, I said firmly. You're still here. That mattered. Because as long as she hadn't done anything, there was still a way out. She leaned back slowly in her seat. Her shoulders dropping, as if she was finally letting go of something she had been holding for too long. I should have told you, she whispered. Yes, I replied softly. But you can still tell me now. She took a deep breath. Then another. And then, she started talking. Really talking. It started a year ago, she said. I wanted to invest in something. I listened carefully. A friend introduced me to someone. Her voice tightened slightly. They said it was a good opportunity. I nodded slowly. And? I lost money. How much? She hesitated. More than I could afford. That alone was enough to worry me. But I knew that wasn't the end of it. And then? I asked gently. I tried to recover it. How? By borrowing. I closed my eyes briefly. Because I had seen this pattern before. Not with her. But in others. And it never ended well. I thought I could fix it before anyone found out, she continued. But it kept getting worse. How much do you owe now? I asked softly. She didn't answer right away. Then she said it. A number that made my heart sink. That's not something you can handle alone, I said quietly. I know, she whispered. There was a pause. Then she added something that made everything even clearer. They're not just asking for money anymore. I looked at her. What do you mean? They're threatening me. My chest tightened. They said if I don't pay soon. She stopped. They'll come to the house. And that's why you brought me here? I asked gently. She nodded slowly. I thought, if I could just solve it quickly. Her voice broke. I didn't think this through. I squeezed her hand slightly. You're scared, I said softly. She nodded. Tears finally filling her eyes. I didn't want to hurt you, she whispered. I just didn't see another way. I felt something shift inside me again. Not fear this time. Not even anger. Just sadness. Because the person sitting next to me wasn't someone trying to hurt me. She was someone who had lost her way. We're going to fix this, I said calmly. She looked at me. How? Together. She shook her head slightly. You don't understand how serious this is. Then help me understand, I replied. Tell me everything. She hesitated. Then she reached into her bag. Pulled out her phone. Her hands were shaking now. More than before. She unlocked it. Scrolled for a moment. Then turned the screen toward me. Messages. Dozens of them. Short. Aggressive. demanding. My heart pounded as I read them. Because now, this wasn't just a bad situation. It was dangerous. They told me what to do, she said quietly. I looked at her. What exactly did they say? She swallowed. They said, accidents happen in places like this. The words felt cold. Calculated. And you believe them? I asked gently. I didn't want to, she whispered. But I was desperate. I nodded slowly. Because desperation can make people think things they normally never would. But you didn't do it, I said. She shook her head quickly. No. And you're not going to. She looked at me. And this time, there was no hesitation. No. That mattered. More than anything else. I took a deep breath. Then said something carefully. We need to leave. She nodded immediately. Yes. She reached for the keys. Her hands still shaking. But now, there was purpose in her movement. Not hesitation. Not doubt. The engine started. The sound breaking the silence around us. As she slowly turned the car around. I looked out at the mountains again. The same place that had felt so dangerous just moments ago. Now felt like something else. A turning point. Because sometimes, the most dangerous moment is the one right before someone chooses to do the wrong thing. And sometimes, the strongest moment is when they choose not to. As we began driving back, away from the trees, away from that empty road, away from everything that could have gone wrong, I realized something. We weren't safe yet. Not completely. Because whatever she had gotten involved in was still out there. Waiting. The road back felt longer than the way in. Not because of distance. But because of everything that had changed. Neither of us spoke for the first few minutes. The sound of the tires on the gravel. The quiet hum of the engine. That was all there was. I glanced at her. Her eyes stayed fixed on the road. But now, they weren't empty anymore. They were alert. Worried. Thinking. Are they going to call you? I asked gently. She nodded. They usually do. When? Soon. As if on cue. Her phone lit up. The sound made both of us tense. She didn't pick it up right away. She just stared at the screen. Answer it, I said softly. She looked at me. What do I say? The truth, I replied. She hesitated. Then tapped the screen. Hello? Her voice was steady. But I could hear the effort behind it. I couldn't hear the other side. But I could see her expression change. Slightly. Just enough. I'm working on it, she said. A pause. I know. Another pause. Her grip on the wheel tightened. Then she said something that made my chest tighten again. I need more time. There was silence on the other end. Long enough to feel uncomfortable. I said I need more time, she repeated. More firmly this time. Another pause. Then. Her face went still. I understand, she said quietly. And then the call ended. She lowered the phone slowly. Her hands trembling again. What did they say? I asked. She swallowed. They're not happy. That didn't surprise me. What else? She hesitated. Then said it. They said they'll come looking for me. The words hung in the air. Heavy. Real. I took a slow breath. Did they give a time? No. Did they say where? No. That uncertainty was worse than anything else. Because it meant. We didn't know when. We didn't know how. But we knew. They weren't done. We're going home, I said calmly. She nodded. The road slowly became familiar again. The trees began to thin. The light grew brighter. And for a moment, it almost felt like things were returning to normal. But they weren't. Not yet. As we reached the main road, she finally spoke again. I didn't think it would get this far. I looked at her. Most people don't. She let out a small breath. I thought I could handle it. You were trying to fix something alone, I said gently. That's always harder than it looks. She nodded slowly. I should have told you. Yes, I said softly. But you didn't. And now we deal with it. We drove in silence again. But this time, it wasn't heavy. It wasn't tense. It was focused. When we finally pulled into the driveway, she turned off the engine. And just sat there. For a long moment. We're not safe here, are we? She asked quietly. I didn't answer immediately. Because I wanted to be honest. Not completely, I said. She nodded. As if she already knew. What do we do? She asked. That question mattered. Because this wasn't just about fear anymore. It was about action. We don't hide, I said calmly. She looked at me. Then what? We face it. Her eyes widened slightly. How? I took a deep breath. Then said something that would change everything. We tell someone. She froze. Tell who? I held her gaze. People who can actually help. She shook her head immediately. No. They'll make it worse, she added quickly. That's what you think, I replied. But staying silent already made it worse. She didn't respond. But I could see it. She was thinking. Because deep down, she knew I was right. We don't have to decide everything right now, I said gently. But we can't ignore it anymore. She leaned back in her seat. Closed her eyes for a moment. Then slowly. She nodded. Okay, she whispered. That one word carried more courage than anything else she had said so far. Because saying yes meant facing everything she had been trying to avoid. And that was never easy. As we stepped out of the car, I looked at her. Really looked at her. She still looked scared. Still uncertain. But she also looked different. Stronger. And for the first time since this started, I believed something. We might actually get through this. But deep down, I also knew something else. This wasn't over. Because whatever she had gotten involved in was about to follow us home. The house didn't feel the same when we walked in. It was the same walls. The same furniture. The same quiet ticking clock in the hallway. But something had changed. Maybe it was us. Maybe it was the truth we were now carrying. Or maybe it was the feeling that something else was coming. She locked the door behind us. Something she didn't usually do during the day. The small click echoed louder than it should have. Sit down, I said gently. She nodded. We moved into the living room. But neither of us sat right away. It felt strange. Like we didn't quite know what to do next. Finally, she sat on the edge of the couch. Her hands clasped tightly together. I took a seat across from her. We need to think clearly, I said softly. She nodded. I'm trying. Start from the beginning, I continued. Tell me everything you haven't told me yet. She hesitated. Then slowly. She began. There's more than one person, she said. I figured, I replied calmly. They work together, she continued. And they don't like being ignored. I felt a quiet tension rise again. How many? I don't know exactly. 2, maybe 3. That was enough to understand one thing. This wasn't just a simple debt. This was something organized. They gave me deadlines, she said. And every time I missed one, it got worse. How did they contact you? Mostly calls, messages. Do they know where you live? I asked. She looked down. And that silence gave me my answer. Yes, she whispered. I took a slow breath. Because that changed everything. They've never come here, she added quickly. Not yet. Not yet. Those two words stayed in my mind. We can't wait for that to happen, I said firmly. She nodded. I know. There was a moment of silence. Then she said something that caught me off guard. I thought about leaving. Leaving? I repeated. Just going somewhere, disappearing for a while. I shook my head gently. That wouldn't solve anything. I know, she said quietly. I just didn't know what else to do. That feeling again. Desperation. I leaned forward slightly. Running away doesn't remove the problem, I said softly. It just follows you. She nodded slowly. I understand that now. That mattered. Because understanding changes everything. Then her phone buzzed again. Both of us froze for a second. She looked at the screen. Didn't pick it up this time. Don't answer it, I said calmly. She nodded. And placed the phone face down on the table. The room felt quiet again. But not peaceful. Not yet. We need a plan, I said. She looked at me. What kind of plan? One that protects you. And you, she added softly. I gave a small nod. Yes, and me. That was the first time she had said that. The first time she had thought about me in all of this. And I could see it. The guilt. The realization. I'm sorry, she said suddenly. I looked at her. I know. I didn't think. She stopped. I know, I repeated gently. Because sometimes. There are no perfect words for something like this. Only understanding. We're going to fix this, I said again. She nodded. But this time. There was more belief in her eyes. What's the first step, she asked. I paused for a moment. Then said it clearly. We gather everything. Everything, she asked. Messages. Numbers. Names. Any detail you have. She nodded. I can do that. Good, I said. Because information was power. And then, she asked. I took a deep breath. Then we decide who to trust. That word mattered. Trust. Because this situation had started with the wrong kind of trust. And now, we needed the right kind. She leaned back slowly. Processing everything. I'm scared, she admitted. I nodded. That's okay. Because fear means you understand the risk. And understanding is the first step toward control. The room fell quiet again. But this time, it felt different. Not helpless. Focused. Because now, we weren't reacting anymore. We were preparing. And deep down, I knew something. The next step we took would change everything. That night, the house didn't sleep. Not really. The lights stayed on longer than usual. The silence felt heavier. And every small sound felt louder than it should have. She sat at the dining table with her phone and a small notebook. Writing things down. Names. Numbers. Dates. I watched her quietly from across the room. Not to pressure her. Just to be there. Is that all of them? I asked gently. She nodded. I think so. Her voice sounded tired, but focused. "Show me," I said. She slid the notebook toward me. I looked at it carefully. 3 numbers. No names. Just initials. Short notes beside each one. "They never told me everything," she said. "Just what I needed to know." That wasn't surprising. People like that rarely give full information. "Have you ever met them in person?" I asked. She shook her head. "No. Not even once?" "No." That gave me a small sense of relief. Because it meant there was still some distance between them. "Do they know what you look like?" I asked. She hesitated. Then nodded. "I sent them a copy of my ID, when I first borrowed the money." I closed my eyes for a brief moment. Because that made things more serious. "Okay," I said calmly. "We'll work with what we have." She looked at me. "What are we going to do with it?" I paused. Because this next step mattered. "We're going to stop this from getting worse." "How?" she asked. "By not playing their game anymore." She frowned slightly. "I don't understand." "They rely on fear," I explained softly. "On silence." She listened carefully. "The more you respond the way they expect, the more control they have." "So what do I do?" she asked. "You stop reacting." She stared at me. "And if they come here?" That question hung in the air. Heavy. Real. I didn't rush my answer. "Then we deal with it," I said calmly. She shook her head slightly. "That's what I'm afraid of." "I know," I replied gently. "But running from it won't make it disappear." She looked down at her hands. "I brought you into this," she said quietly. I leaned forward. "No," I said softly. "You made a mistake." She didn't look up. "But you also made a choice," I continued. "What choice?" she asked. "You chose not to go through with it." That mattered. More than anything else. She finally looked at me. And I could see it. A small shift. "I didn't think of it like that," she said. "Most people don't," I replied. The room fell quiet again. But this time, it wasn't fear. It was something else. Understanding. "Do you think they'll stop?" she asked. I shook my head slowly. "No." She swallowed. "But they will change," I added. "How?" "They'll push harder first." Her expression tightened. "And then?" "Then, they'll look for easier targets." She stayed silent. Processing that. "People like that don't like resistance," I continued. "They like control." "And if they lose control?" she asked. "They move on." She let out a slow breath. "I hope you're right," she whispered. "I'm not guessing," I said gently. "I've seen situations like this before." She looked at me. "You have?" I nodded. "Not exactly the same, but close enough." That seemed to calm her slightly. For the first time that night, her shoulders relaxed. Just a little. "Can I ask you something?" she said. "Of course." "Why are you so calm?" I smiled faintly. "I'm not," I said honestly. She looked surprised. "I'm just choosing to be," I added. Because panic wouldn't help. Fear wouldn't solve anything. But calm thinking could. She nodded slowly. "I want to be like that," she said. "You will be," I replied. "It just takes time." The clock on the wall ticked softly. Hours had passed. But neither of us felt like sleeping yet. Because even though we had a plan, we knew something. This wasn't over. Not yet. And somewhere out there, someone was waiting for an answer they weren't going to get. The night passed slowly. Not in hours. But in moments. Every sound felt sharper. Every shadow felt deeper. And even though we stayed inside, it didn't feel like enough. Morning came quietly. Soft light through the windows. Birds somewhere in the distance. Everything looked normal again. But nothing felt normal. She was already awake when I walked into the kitchen. Sitting at the table. Her phone in front of her. Still face down. "Did you sleep?" I asked gently. She shook her head. "Not really." I poured 2 cups of tea. Placed one in front of her. She wrapped her hands around it. Like she needed something steady to hold on to. "They haven't called again," she said. "That's not a bad thing," I replied. She nodded. But I could see it in her eyes. The waiting was worse. "What if they show up?" she asked. I didn't answer immediately. "Then we don't face it alone," I said calmly. She looked at me. "You really think that's enough?" "It's a start," I replied. Because right now, we didn't need perfect answers. We needed steady ones. The morning moved slowly. We stayed close. Did small things. Tried to keep some sense of normal. But underneath it all, there was tension. By midday, her phone buzzed again. This time, it wasn't a call. It was a message. She froze. Just for a second. Then picked it up. Her eyes scanned the screen. And I saw it. The change in her expression. "What does it say?" I asked. She didn't answer right away. Then she turned the phone toward me. A short message. Simple. Cold. "You're running out of time." My chest tightened slightly. "Is that all?" I asked. She nodded. No threats. No details. But somehow, that made it worse. Because it meant they didn't need to say more. They expected her to understand. "They're testing you," I said quietly. She looked at me. "What do you mean?" "They're seeing if you'll react." She swallowed. "I want to respond," she said. "I know," I replied. "But don't." She hesitated. "What if ignoring them makes it worse?" "Responding the wrong way will," I said calmly. She looked down at the phone again. Then slowly placed it back on the table. Face down. That was harder than it looked. And I knew it. Because sometimes doing nothing is the hardest choice. The afternoon passed without another message. But the tension didn't leave. If anything, it grew quieter. Deeper. By evening, the sky had turned gray. Clouds gathering slowly. And that's when we heard it. A sound outside. A car. Pulling up. We both froze. The engine stopped. Silence. Then, a car door closed. My heart started to race. But I stayed still. She looked at me. Her eyes wide. "Stay here," I said quietly. I stood up slowly. Walked toward the window. Carefully. And then I saw it. A car. Parked just outside. Not familiar. Not someone we knew. My breath slowed. But my mind stayed sharp. "Do you recognize it?" I asked without turning. "No," she whispered. We stood there. Listening. Waiting. Seconds felt like minutes. Then, another sound. Footsteps. Slow. Approaching the door. She grabbed my arm. "Mom." I placed my hand over hers. "It's okay," I said softly. But inside, I wasn't sure. The knock came next. 3 slow taps. Not loud. Not aggressive. But deliberate. We didn't move. The knock came again. This time, a little firmer. And in that moment, standing in that quiet house, with everything we had just been through, I realized something. This wasn't just fear anymore. This was the moment. Everything would either fall apart or come together. The knock came again. Slower this time. More deliberate. As if whoever stood outside wasn't in a hurry. I didn't move right away. Neither did she. We just stood there, listening. "Don't open it," she whispered. Her grip tightened on my arm. "I'm not going to rush," I replied softly. Another knock. 3 taps. Exactly the same. That pattern. It didn't feel random. It felt controlled. I walked slowly toward the door. Each step careful. Measured. "Mom, please," she said again. I stopped. Turned to her. "We can't stay frozen," I said gently. Her eyes were filled with fear. "What if it's them?" she asked. "Then we face it, carefully," I replied. I looked toward the door again. Then toward the small side window beside it. Without making a sound, I stepped closer. Slowly. I leaned just enough to see outside. And then I paused. Because what I saw wasn't what I expected. Not a group. Not someone aggressive. Just one person. Standing there. A man. He looked ordinary. Calm. Not threatening. But something about him didn't feel right. "Do you see anyone?" she whispered. "Yes," I said quietly. "Who?" "I don't know." That was the truth. He didn't match what I had imagined. And that made him more dangerous. Because uncertainty is harder to read than fear. The knock came again. This time, he spoke. "I know you're inside." His voice was calm. Controlled. That made my chest tighten. Because people who are angry raise their voices. People like this don't say anything, I whispered to her. She nodded quickly. We stayed still. Silent. Seconds passed. Then he spoke again. "We just want to talk." I almost smiled. Not because it was funny, but because it was predictable. Talk never meant just talk. I looked back at her. She shook her head. "No." I nodded. We were on the same page. The man outside shifted slightly. I could hear his footsteps. Slow. Measured. Then his voice came again. "You're making this harder than it needs to be." That line carried something underneath it. Not anger. Pressure. He wanted a reaction. Any reaction. But we didn't give him one. We stayed quiet. Still. After a moment, the silence stretched. Then, footsteps again. This time, moving away. We both held our breath. Listening. A car door opened. Closed. The engine started. And just like that, he was gone. The house felt silent again. But not the same kind of silence as before. This one was heavier. She let go of my arm slowly. "Was that them?" she asked. "I don't know," I said honestly. "But it's connected." She sat down slowly. Her legs almost giving out beneath her. "They know where we are," she whispered. I nodded. Yes. That was no longer a question. It was a fact. The room felt smaller now. Not physically, but emotionally. Because the outside world had just stepped in. "We can't ignore this anymore," I said quietly. She looked up at me. "I know." And this time, her voice didn't shake. It was steady. Because fear had reached its limit. And something else had taken its place. Resolve. "What do we do now?" she asked. I took a deep breath. And gave her the answer we had been avoiding. "Now, we stop handling this alone." She nodded. No hesitation this time. Because now, she understood something clearly. This wasn't just a problem anymore. It was a situation that needed real help. And for the first time, we were ready to face it. For a long moment, neither of us spoke. The sound of that car driving away still echoed in my mind. Not because it was loud, but because of what it meant. "They came here," she said quietly. Not as a question. As a realization. "Yes," I replied. Her hands were still shaking slightly. But her voice wasn't. "That means they won't stop," she added. I nodded slowly. "That's why we can't wait anymore." She looked at me. "You were right," she said. That wasn't something she said often. And I could feel the weight behind it. "We need help," she continued. I gave a small nod. Yes. This time, there was no hesitation. No resistance. Because sometimes, it takes seeing the danger up close to finally accept the truth. "Who do we go to?" she asked. I took a breath. "Someone who deals with situations like this." She understood immediately. "You mean?" "Yes," I said softly. There was a pause. Not fear this time. Just acceptance. "Okay," she whispered. That one word carried more courage than anything else. We didn't waste time after that. She gathered everything. Her phone. The messages. The numbers. The notes she had written the night before. I watched her carefully. She wasn't moving like someone who was panicking anymore. She was moving with purpose. And that made all the difference. Before we left, she stopped near the door. Took a deep breath. Then looked at me. "Are you sure about this?" she asked. I met her eyes. "I'm sure about one thing," I said. "What?" "We're not doing this alone anymore." She nodded. And we stepped outside together. The air felt different. Cooler. Sharper. Not threatening. But real. Because for the first time, we weren't hiding from the situation. We were walking straight into it. The drive felt shorter this time. Not because the distance changed, but because our mindset had. We weren't avoiding anything anymore. We were facing it. When we arrived, she hesitated for just a second. Then opened the door. We stepped inside. The room was quiet. Calm. But there was something about it that made everything feel more grounded. Like we had finally stepped into a place where things could be handled properly. She sat down. Placed her phone on the table. "I need help," she said. Her voice was steady. Clear. Not ashamed. Not defensive. Just honest. And that mattered. Because honesty was the first real step out of everything she had been trapped in. They listened. Carefully. Patiently. She told them everything. From the beginning. To the messages. To the mountains. To the man at the door. Nothing held back. And when she finished, the room was quiet for a moment. Then one of them spoke. "You did the right thing by coming here." I looked at her. Because that was something she needed to hear. "You're not alone in this," they added. And for the first time, that statement felt real. Not just something we were telling ourselves, but something we could actually believe. They took the information, the numbers, the messages, and began to piece things together. As they worked, I watched my daughter. Her shoulders had finally relaxed. Not completely, but enough. Because the weight she had been carrying alone was no longer hers to hold. And that changed everything. But even then, I knew something. This wasn't the end. Because situations like this don't just disappear overnight. They unfold. And sometimes, the hardest part comes after you decide to face them. The room felt different after she finished speaking. Not lighter. Not completely safe. But steadier. Like something that had been hidden for too long was finally out in the open. They asked a few more questions. Careful ones. Specific ones. Nothing rushed. Nothing overwhelming. Have you met any of them in person? One of them asked. No, she replied. Only through calls and messages. Did they ever give names? She shook her head. No. Just instructions. I sat beside her quietly. Listening. Watching. Because this wasn't just about answers anymore. It was about understanding the full picture. They rely on pressure, the man said calmly. Fear, urgency, and isolation. That word again. Isolation. I glanced at my daughter. Because that's exactly where she had been. Alone. Trying to handle everything herself. They expect quick reactions, he continued. And when they don't get them, they escalate. Like coming to the house, she said softly. He nodded. Yes. Her hands tightened slightly in her lap. Will they come back? She asked. There was a pause. Not long. But enough to feel real. They might, he said honestly. She swallowed. But they're less likely to act when they know they're being watched, he added. That made sense. Right now, he continued, the most important thing is that you don't respond to them directly. She nodded. And if they contact you again? You let us know, he said. Simple. Clear. For the first time since this began. There was structure. Not confusion. Not guessing. A plan. After a while, we stepped outside again. The air felt different now. Not heavy. Not sharp. Just calm. She stood there for a moment, looking out at the street. I should have done this sooner, she said quietly. I looked at her. Maybe, I replied. But you did it now. That mattered more. She nodded slowly. I kept thinking I could fix it on my own. That's what most people do, I said gently. Until they realize, some problems aren't meant to be handled alone. She let out a small breath. I almost made a mistake I couldn't take back. I didn't respond immediately. Because that truth didn't need more words. Instead, I placed my hand over hers. You didn't, I said softly. And that was enough. We drove home in silence. But this silence was different. Not filled with fear. Not filled with tension. Just quiet understanding. When we pulled into the driveway, she didn't hesitate this time. She stepped out of the car. Walked toward the door. Not slowly. Not uncertainly. But steadily. Inside, the house felt the same. But we didn't. Because something had changed. Not outside. Inside us. Later that evening. Her phone buzzed again. We both looked at it. But this time, neither of us rushed. She picked it up calmly. Read the message. Then looked at me. What does it say? I asked. She held the phone up. This is your last chance. I nodded slowly. Okay, I said. She frowned slightly. That's it? That's it, I replied. Because now. We understood something. This wasn't power anymore. It was pressure. And pressure only works when you give it control. She placed the phone down. Didn't respond. Didn't react. And in that moment, I saw it clearly. She wasn't afraid in the same way anymore. She was aware. And that is stronger than fear. But even then, I knew something. This wasn't the end. Because when pressure stops working, people like that don't always walk away quietly. That night, something shifted. Not outside. Inside. For the first time since all of this began. We didn't sit in silence because of fear. We sat in silence because we were thinking. Clearly. Her phone stayed on the table. Face up this time. Not hidden. Not avoided. They'll message again, she said quietly. Maybe, I replied. But it won't be the same. She looked at me. What do you mean? They've lost control, I said. She didn't answer right away. But I could see it. She was replaying everything in her mind. The calls. The pressure. The threats. And how it had all worked before. Until now. I didn't realize how much I was reacting, she said slowly. That's how it works, I replied. They push, you respond, and it keeps going. She nodded. And now? Now you're not playing that role anymore. That realization settled in. Because it wasn't just about ignoring messages. It was about breaking a pattern. A pattern that had been controlling her for months. Later that evening, we heard another sound outside. Not loud. Not sudden. Just a car passing slowly. We both looked toward the window. But this time, neither of us froze. We just watched. The car moved on. Gone within seconds. But something about that moment mattered. Because before, that sound would have filled the room with fear. Now, it didn't. And that's when I understood something important. The situation hadn't changed yet. But we had. And sometimes, that's where real change begins. The next morning felt lighter. Not because everything was solved. But because we weren't carrying it alone anymore. She made breakfast. Something simple. And for the first time in days, we sat at the table like we used to. No tension. No urgency. Just quiet. I've been thinking, she said after a while. About what? About how I got here. I listened. I kept trying to fix one mistake with another, she said. And it just kept growing. I nodded. That's how it usually happens. She looked at me. I don't want to live like that anymore. That sentence mattered. Because it wasn't about fear anymore. It was about change. You won't, I said gently. Not because I knew the future. But because I could see the shift in her. And that's where it starts. Later that day, there was another message. Short. Different tone this time. Less confident. Almost uncertain. She read it. Then handed me the phone. We need to talk. I looked at her. That's new, she said. I nodded. Yes, it is. Because that message wasn't pressure. It was adjustment. They're changing their approach, I said. She took a slow breath. What do I do? I met her eyes. The same thing you've been doing. Nothing? Nothing, and everything, I replied softly. Because doing nothing was now a choice. A strong one. She placed the phone down again. No reply. No hesitation. And in that moment, I realized something. The person who had once been driven by fear was now guided by clarity. And that changes everything. But even then, I knew one last thing. This situation still had one final moment left. Not of fear, but of resolution. Because sometimes, the real ending doesn't come when things stop. It comes when you understand what you've learned. The message stayed on the table. We need to talk. Just a few words. But this time, they didn't carry the same weight. Not fear. Not urgency. Just an attempt. She looked at it for a long moment. Then at me. They're changing, she said quietly. I nodded. Yes. Why? Because what they were doing before isn't working anymore. That was the truth. Pressure only works when it's answered. Fear only grows when it's fed. And now, they had neither. Do I respond? She asked. I didn't answer immediately. Because this moment mattered. Not alone, I said finally. She understood. No hesitation this time. We sat together. Calm. Steady. And for the first time since this began, we weren't reacting to the situation. We were choosing how to handle it. She picked up her phone. Typed a message. Then paused. Looked at me. Is this okay? She asked. I read it carefully. It was simple. Clear. Not emotional. Not defensive. Then I nodded. Yes. She pressed send. And placed the phone back down. No shaking hands this time. No fear in her eyes. Just quiet strength. We waited. Minutes passed. Then longer. The house was still. But it didn't feel heavy anymore. Finally. The phone buzzed again. She picked it up. Read the message. Then something unexpected happened. She exhaled. Slowly. What is it? I asked. She turned the phone toward me. A short reply. We'll be in touch. That was it. No threats. No pressure. No urgency. Just distance. I nodded slowly. They're stepping back, I said. She stared at the message. Just like that? She asked. Not just like that, I replied gently. This happened because you stopped playing their game. That truth settled in. Because everything that had once felt overwhelming now made sense. They needed me to be afraid, she said. Yes. And when I stopped, they lost control. She leaned back in her seat. For a long moment, she didn't speak. Then finally, she smiled. Just a little. I almost destroyed everything, she said quietly. I looked at her. But you didn't, I replied. That was what mattered. Not how close she had come. But that she had stepped back. Chosen differently. And that choice changed everything. Later that evening, we sat together in the living room. The same place where everything had once felt so uncertain. Now, it felt calm. Not because the world outside had changed overnight, but because we had. I keep thinking about that day, she said softly. In the mountains. I nodded. So do I. I don't recognize that version of myself, she added. That's because it wasn't who you are, I said gently. It was who you became, under pressure. She looked down. I never want to feel like that again. You won't, I said. Because now. She knew the signs. The silence. The fear. The desperation. And most importantly, She knew what happens when you face them. You saved me, she said suddenly. I shook my head. No. She looked at me. You saved yourself, I said softly. I just reminded you who you are. Her eyes filled slightly. But she didn't look away. Because this time, there was nothing to hide from. Not the past. Not the truth. And not herself. A few days later, life slowly returned to normal. Not exactly the same. But better. Stronger. Because now, there was awareness. And awareness changes everything. One evening, she stood by the door, getting ready to leave. I'll see you tomorrow, she said. I smiled. Drive safe. She paused. Then turned back. Mom. Yes? Thank you, for not giving up on me. I looked at her. That was never an option. She smiled. And this time, it reached her eyes. Then she left. I stood there for a moment, thinking about everything. The fear. The silence. The choices. And the moment. Everything could have gone wrong. But didn't. Because in the end, it wasn't about the mountains. It wasn't about the messages. It wasn't even about the danger. It was about one simple thing. The moment she stopped running. And chose to face the truth. And that saved her life. Sometimes, the people we trust the most can lose their way. But all it takes is one moment of truth to find it again. If this story touched your heart, don't forget to like and subscribe. And tell me in the comments, what would you have done in my place?